Hovvdy released their sophomore album Cranberry in February of 2018. And that is when I found them and initially fell for their brand of lo-fi, but yet maximally vulnerable and earnest sound, something that sounds like it was recorded a room away and always a few years in the past. Big World, the duo's newest record, is a sister album to Cranberry in almost every structural way. There are 12 songs here, just like there were on Cranberry, and there's no filler. Only about 35 minutes total. Charlie Martin and Will Taylor's vocals still run through the same vocoder-like filter that you see present in a lot of their music, still suspended somewhere outside of real time, and you can't put your finger exactly on where. But something has flipped. Cranberry was tuned down. It was soft. It was a little dark. It's a cozy winter record. Big World is tuned up. Lighter instrumentation, hopeful inflection, warmth instead of brood. It's here now in August, and it's a much more summery sound. Big World sounds nostalgic, but argues forward. The production is like a memory, and it's the narratives that are actually what's in motion. You can hear it in the way that the album itself is built, piecemeal over time, instrument by instrument. It opens almost bare, with two acoustic guitars trading roles on Life So Wide. One holding that foot tapping, steady kind of groove, one dropping in these little flourishes of light. By the time you get to Give It Away, which is 10 tracks later, the percussion has turned into something closer to a Rube Goldberg machine. You've got wood blocks and pans and the edges of a door. It's alternative percussion that sounds calculated and precise rather than found. The world of the record gets physically bigger as it goes on. There are more textures, there's more instruments in the room, there's more space being filled. That expansion is doing the same work as the lyrics. Take Way Down. There is wiry guitar, drums that sound like some dusty secondhand instrument in the best way possible, a plodding and calculated song that turns soulful in its back half with a slide guitar taking the lead into full cowboy territory. It's about a man with a complicated heart trying to keep his life simple and trying to speak only on what he actually knows. That's the early part of Big World, small and contained, and working out how much exactly to say. By the back half of the record, the songs start reaching further. You Will Go Far is where you can hear it at its clearest. There's a full string section, a mandolin that dances in partway through the song and leaves as if it just needed to speak up for a few seconds. Percussion that sounds like it's being played, 2 stories up in some tower. Wooden blocks and pans standing in for drums that sounds almost like a children's playroom. It's the fullest that the album gets, and it's built around a song about judgment. It's about watching someone else's relationship from the outside while quietly wondering about the shape of your own. The instrumentation is doing the exact same widening that the lyrics are, from a bedroom to a horizon, from a private worry to a universal one. That is the arc of this whole album. And then there's the untitled track, which I think is the darkest song here, and the one that sounds to me the most like something straight out of Cranberry. The piano comes in waves, strings and slide guitar are spilling out behind it, and then there is a harmonica that comes back from where it was earlier in the track list, sounding a lot more devastated now, something genuinely in pain, and maybe the only moment of that kind of feeling anywhere on the record. This is undoubtedly a mood song, and you'll feel it's a little out of place on the record without as much of the sugary and glossy production and all of the brightness that we heard earlier. But it's also the one place where the album's actual title surfaces in the lyrics. There's a sunrise ripping through the morning, and there's a question about how much of this big world you're actually going to let yourself see versus how much you'll just keep telling yourself is still coming. Somehow, the most backward sounding song on this record is the one carrying the most forward looking and biggest idea. It closes on Wannabe Radio Queen, which starts like a radio is being dialed through stations before a completely bare voice takes over. And then about 90 seconds in, the whole thing just completely lifts off. There's electric guitar and bass and a synthesizer all of a sudden that's riding high in the mix. I think that fans of The Killers are going to recognize this and love it. It's about how much time is left and how much there is still to see, and how loneliness can hide inside either of those choices. Chasing more or choosing to settle down, that's where the record leaves you, still asking the question it opened with, but just from higher up. Howdy is at their best when they're figuring out how to chase the sweetest lick and the glossiest hook, and then deciding how they can make it sound like it's sitting right next to you. This is down to earth pop rock with a little bit of a Nashville edge. Big World is doing this constantly, track after track. There are no misses. It is the sound of two musicians who've gotten better with age without losing the thing that made them worth loving in the first place. They know what makes them them. The greatest and most mature performers know that it's more than enough to pitch 6 scoreless innings and then bow out before they tire in the 7th, and that is what Howdy does here. I think it's an excellent addition to their discography and a worthy and focused follow-up to a high watermark from their previous self-titled album. Now it's time to dig in and go track by track. Track 1, Life So Wide. I didn't initially love this song because it's really very simple, and maybe some people would say a little too simple. There's really just 2 acoustic guitars here in the song, but they're both doing different jobs. One of them is very much the foot tapping rhythm, and then there's one that's sort of injecting these little flourishes of light over the top. And it is a really light song. It immediately makes itself known that this album is going to be kind of summery and hopeful and with a lot of upward inflection. The vocals are the classic Howdy style. They're soft, they're lo-fi, they're a little bit hushed and not quite whispered, but in that kind of registered. And they're also really uplifting. You can hum along to every bit of this song. It doesn't really grow all of that much over time. There is a moment with a little bit of like a piano medley in the middle where it's just sort of flirting with the song for a moment. It gives it sort of this mysterious feeling all of a sudden in the middle. It's short and sweet, and it's sort of the quintessential Howdy song, in my opinion. And it's the perfect way to open up the record. I think lyrically, it seems like it's like a lot of Howdy songs. It's kind of a love song, kind of a reflective song, maybe something bigger than that. But you can read it most directly as like the early stages of a love song. It's more of a what I would call a like song. This really started to grow on me, and there's a lot more in the interplay of those 2 guitars than I thought there was at the beginning. And the vocal work here is just, again, absolutely throwing heat essentially for what this band knows they do best. And so I ended up coming away thinking it's actually a great song. Track 2, Way Down. The drums are the immediate standout here for me, and then you get this little kind of wiry guitar line that's supporting underneath throughout. You know, they make this sound down to earth and something that you could produce in your own bedroom, but of course you can't. This song is plotting and calculated. They understand every second of it. Every one of those beats is perfectly timed and anticipated. It's crafted expertly. The vocals here, we get a little bit more of a full quality, right? They raise the register of the vocals a bit, but it's still processed through that vocoder type filter that we know the band loves so much. And about halfway through the song transitions, you get this very soulful swell, and then there is suddenly a couple of different guitars taking center stage, including what I think is a slide guitar, giving a really lonely tone. And it becomes kind of a country western song all of a sudden, but nonetheless, really infectious and instantly a head bobber, something that you can't really get out of your ear. It's a lot more of a complex song than you might think at first look. It's quick, just like every song on this record. I don't think anything here is over 3.5 or 4 minutes, and this does a lot of work in that short period of time, but it does expand and contract and give room for those guitar solos in the middle. And it really just, has a layered feel to it. Lyrically, it's just a wonderful little country song. I think just about anybody can recognize some of the sentiments in this narrative. I kind of get the idea of a man who is, complicated at heart, but trying to keep his life simple, right? Only speaking on what he knows. And that there's always a little bit that's sort of lost in translation in his life. And so it's this, again, another instantly relatable kind of song. This is what they do, this is what they write. And I think, all things considered, this still is my favorite track on the record. It is the cowboy song, and I think it's legendary. Track 3, JJ. The drums are a little more muddled here. I think there's something closer to a drum machine happening, which is not my favorite thing in the world. The acoustic guitars are doing kind of a little bit of window dressing. They're light and airy. It's still a very classic Howdy song, and it has a real pop beat to it. And I would say this is one of the most poppy songs on the record overall, which makes it not exactly one of my favorites, but I think something that a lot of people would enjoy. And it's something that's obviously very easy to sing along to. Both the chorus and the pre-chorus are extremely easy to kind of get in your head and just repeat over and over again, just like the band does. And there's still moments of really, crisp, glossy electric guitar that weasels its way in and just gives sort of this glass mood and feeling to the song. It's almost a little bit shoegaze in the last 30 seconds or so. Lyrically, I think it is something a little bit different from the last two. It seems more like it's about familial love. I get the sense of like trying to protect a loved one rather than somebody that is the object of desire. But it's interesting. It's kind of a change of pace there, and so you still get a lot of those warm feelings, but not exactly like romantic. Another instantly relatable song. Again, super easy to sing along to, but I think the repetitiveness is what takes away from it a little bit for me. I think it's just good. Track 4, What I Had. This slows things down a little bit after the high tempo that we get on JJ. There is a lazy acoustic lick that opens up, and you get this really wonderful kind of sunset infused harmonica. I immediately thought this sounds a little bit like a Jack Johnson song with all of that. The vocals are really clean for the first time on the record. We don't get any kind of vocal effect pasted over them, or at least nothing that registers for me. But it's still sort of a low and register song. And again, fairly poppy and has that foot tapping quality to it, something that you can kind of bob your head along to. It's really warm and waltzy, and it's just it sprawls. It's something that takes its time a little bit. Again, doesn't run on for too long. Nothing here does. You can hear that there are competent musicians that have been doing this a while. Near the end, the guitar tone almost has like this sort of surf vibe to it, and it reminds me of something that the War on Drugs would have put out in the early 2010s, which actually kind of bumped it up a little bit in my book. Lyrically, there's a lot more of what we got on the first two tracks here in this one. Seems like a bit of a love song, but also a little bit of a regret song, sort of a relationship swung and missed on, maybe. It has a little bit of a bittersweetness to it, which is a little different than what we've heard so far. And I think puts it at a great song. Track 5, Blast. This was one of the singles, and admittedly not one that I really was taking to when I first heard it. But I do like it where it sits more in the record here, because it's the first time that we get some darker tones, where we get a little bit of a tuned down feel, where it's not as summery and warm. And I think it does sound a little bit like something that would come off of Cranberry. So for that, I do like it. The guitar notes are open, and the drumming is kind of like this hip hop inspired beat, but it's still pretty cautious and slow. And I would say the beat really is the star here. It's a very much a classic pop style song that is relying on that beat and the repeated vocals, and something that you can sort of sing along to. Again, like JJ, that's one of the things that actually detracts from it for me. But it is actually, if you really sit with it and kind of listen through a lot of the tones and some of the layers that are running through this, it's actually a lot more interesting than it seemed as a single to me. The drawback for me ultimately is actually the drum sound itself, which is just this sort of hollow, bodiless feeling that I just can't stop hearing as something that wasn't played in real time. It may have been, I just don't like the tone on it so much. Lyrically, we have a repeated chorus that reads like a song about settling and wrestling with the thought of whether your life might be versus what it turned out to be. And again, while that's instantly relatable for everybody, it is a little bit too repetitive, right? We get that touchdown, small town over and over and over and over again for like 2 minutes in the song. It is most of the song. I get why they're doing it. I get why it was a single, but I think it's just good. Track 6, Starry. This is another slower tempo, kind of a downturn in the run of the album, which I actually think fits really well here. After we've had a couple of like bangers, if you will, a lot of pop songs and high energy that are kind of running through. This takes things down a notch. It's primarily piano, it's primarily drums, and very, very hushed vocals. Everything is really drawing itself out. Again, not taking too long, but still allowing with the runtime that it has to let things breathe a little bit. It still has a really warm tone. It's kind of like a lounge song, and it's a sugary one, and it just lets itself kind of be a piano song, really, a piano and vocal song. I think it's a little safe, unfortunately, because while the vocals are supposed to be the star, there isn't really any effect on them, and this is one of the places where I think the band could have done well to put one of their classic, vocal um, filters on top of this just to make it a little more interesting, even if it might have turned some people off. It's definitely a ballad, and it has some really, just earnest lines. He repeats over and over again, "You're picture perfect on my wall. I hung you up. I felt your love. I'll always be yours." It's really straight and to the point. This is what Hovvdy does. I do think it's just a good song. Track 7, Try, 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 is another one of the singles. Didn't immediately land for me when I heard it as a single, but it has become more and more infectious. It is, I think, kind of the closest thing to a straight up indie rock song, but it still has that pop inflection. It has a production that reminds me a little bit of something Danger Mouse might have made about 15 years ago. A little bit of a windows down kind of bop, a little surfy, a little hip hop. It is all heart. It does its job in a very quick stab. Lyrically, it's about kind of the push and pull of love in a deep relationship, is the way I read it. This is where the narrative of the album deepens a bit from where it was at the beginning, and you can see Hovvdy kind of making a pitch for a bigger world and a bigger scope. This is where I believe that begins, and I think Try, Try, Try is a great song. Track 8, Junk, is another slow tempo song, which is hanging on an unwinding acoustic guitar lick and another drum machine that's, instead of sounding electronic, sounds a bit like it's tapping out on a wood block, which does work for me pretty well. We've got strings for the first time on the record and a slide guitar as well that draw things out. An electric keyboard tone is dialing in and out here. Again, this is the band beginning to build a bigger argument and a fuller sound with a bigger scope. And they do that narratively as well, although this lyrically is a pretty oblique song with, I would say, the most cryptic lyrics that we've heard yet. But they paint a really vivid picture, something about like an ignored old garage or a workshop and then a summer field. It puts you in a specific place and time. And for that, it's a really effective mood song. I think Junk is great. Track 9, You Will Go Far. The acoustic guitar plays the rhythm role, and the string section is here long enough to express itself a little more robustly than we've heard before. The drums feel like they're part of a children's playroom instead of a kit, which is actually pretty effective. Another cryptic song, but it's definitely got some bigger ideas in it, right? There's some ideas about judgment and what we think of our own lives versus our friends' lives and how we check up on people and that kind of thing. And it's just, again, a little bit more complex than we heard on the very first part of the album. I think You Will Go Far is great. Track 10, Give It Away. Here we have more alternative percussion. And while it can feel a little bit silly at times, if you just take it for what it is, if you allow Hovvdy to do what they do and just let it be earnest, I think it really lands. We have some acoustic guitar, some electric guitar. We have the fiddle again, layering itself here, kind of swelling in and out. And then about a minute in, all of those elements kind of coalesce during where there's a vocal absence in the song. Here we have a single voice, and it is bare with no obvious effects that are applied. It's the most vulnerable sound on the record. It is, I think, the most emotionally important moment of the record, where the line that they repeat is that loving ain't a feeling till you give it away. And I think that's really the thesis of the album here, right? You've got to let yourself be a little embarrassed, open yourself up a little bit, and be unafraid to feel those things in order to kind of make any kind of progress. And I think that's the argument that the band makes generally and is definitely making here at the end. I've played this one over and over again. It is stuck in my head, and for that, I've got to give it a legendary. Track 11, Untitled. This is probably the darkest sounding song on the record. The piano comes in waves, dragging out notes and letting strings and slide guitars spill their guts out behind it. It is immediately emotionally captivating. It's stuck in amber, stalled in space-time. The harmonica comes back, sounding absolutely devastated and in pain here. The vocals are straight from Cranberry, and honestly, this whole song is. It's incredibly warm and nostalgic and also somber. It's the kind of song that makes you feel a decade younger and unsure of where you'll end up, and then you realize that you're listening to it right now and you're also unsure of where you'll end up. There's brilliant layers of vocal snippets with nobody actually finishing a full thought, but everything just kind of circling around each other and supporting one another. It's a fiercely crafted mood song. It's not a pop track at all, like so many other songs that we've seen on this record. The only real critique that I have is that it doesn't feel like it belongs on this album. I don't think the sequencing quite makes sense, but it's atmospheric and brilliant if that's what you're looking for. Lyrically, this is where the title of the album shows its head. There's a narrative about seeing the sunrise ripping through the morning from your view in the center of the room. It weaves the idea of the center of the room with the idea of being a big world and all there is to see. And it suggests a moment in stasis where you have to decide how much of this big world you can actually see and how much you're going to tell yourself you will. I think this is a great song. Track 12 is the last track of the album, Wannabe Radio Queen. This sounds like an old 90s song with a radio snippet being dialed in at the very beginning. You get these little kind of chunks of this, radio play, and then the acoustic guitar enters and you get a completely bare voice that commands the attention of the room. It sounds really simple. And then after about 90 seconds, the electric guitar turns up for really the loudest we hear it on the entire record here at minute 34. And the bass drops in and we get this huge synthesizer feel. And everything just levitates 20 feet off the ground. Vocals become muffled and filtered, drums and guitar and bass driving ever forward, locked into some deep groove. Slide guitar gives a wink, the heart of the song maintaining its tempo before slowing down for the final 30 seconds, unleashing this noisy guitar tone and electric element not heard anywhere else on the record. It ends quickly and without any ceremony at all. It's a tad pasted together and a little clumsy, but it has an infectious core and a propulsive spirit. Lyrically, this is another song about evaluating your place in life, figuring out how much time there is left, how much there is still to see and to experience. It's forward-looking right to the end. So there you have it. No bad tracks, no okay tracks, 2 legendaries, Way Down and Give It Away, bookending the album's real argument. Love is worth the bet, but it only counts once you hand it over. Time will tell where I think this sits in their full discography, but it's clearly a band at the peak of their confidence and their competency, doing what they do best. They're making something without irony and getting you to hum along with it.